All right, let's try one last time. G'day, guys. Welcome once again to the Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week we will be looking through and going over round 24 in the NRL, the second last round of the season. Good round for us, 10-7 on best bets, and we're hopefully going to be able to hear Jacob here. We've had a couple of test tries. If you're listening to this on podcast form, obviously it's great for you because you haven't been able to deal with a bunch of shit. Jacob, why don't you say a few words and we will decide where we go from here.
Well, isn't it funny that 50 years ago they could put a man on the moon, but here we are in 2019 and we can't fucking hook up for a podcast to talk about footy.
Someone
for some
tell
reason,
us if you can hear Jacob.
I know you can hear me, but I don't know if the good people out there can. So let us know if people can't hear me. I'm going to bugger off. If they can, then we're going to recap the footy together.
We're good. You're in. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Let's go quick today.
I was hoping for a night off.
Oh, fuck. For God's sake.
I'd love one.
They can hear you, which I don't know if is a good or a bad thing for the viewers. I told Jacob if they can't hear you, just fucking get up and leave, and I'll talk to a blank chair or the casting couch for the rest of the day. You are in, Jacob. Let's start with what we just saw. It was the Tigers absolutely demolishing the Dragons. 42 points to 14. We had 5 best bets on the game, won all 5. And to be honest, when you look at the final score, it does look like an absolute Tigers demolition, which it was in the second half. But, at half-time, it still looked like the Dragons, they had a chance. I think with half an hour to go, they were only down 4 points. They actually fought hard for about 50 to 55 minutes of this one, and then the Tigers just ran away with it. Feel bad for the Dragons. They did put in this week, but the Tigers are actually a very solid team, and it makes for an interesting round 25. It's not often that we can say that round 25 is, usually it's all done and dusted, top 8, top 4, and all that kind of thing, but the Tigers-Sharks game next week will be basically for who makes the 8, and that will be an extremely exciting game, and the Tigers, they have been very, very solid, and another solid win from here, and it sets up a cracking round 25 game, to be honest.
Yeah, it's so good. The finals start next week because it's win and you're in, and lose and you're going to Bali. And we said before this game we couldn't understand why the Tigers were such a short favourite. It was pretty much -2 through the week. I think we nabbed a -1.5. It closed closer to 4.
Yes.
I know Corey Norman was a late scratch, but Hunt came in. The score, a little misleading because how many long-range tries did the Tigers get? Intercept try. Pick up a kick and go the distance. So that helped. Yes. But they were too, while the Dragons had a couple tries off fingertips. So as you say, could have been closer early. But the Tigers, that kind of team that doesn't give you anything easy, and then they have the ability to basically grind you down and get that win, which they had to have because otherwise their points differential was too weak. They would have needed to beat the Sharks by 20 next week. Now it is a very simple equation. The winner will get through, and I can't wait for that game.
100%. And before we rewind to Thursday's game between the Cowboys and Bulldogs, someone is asking Jason McQueenie, what's the casting couch? And I'm sure someone in the comments will,
Just put a link.
We'll explain that to you. We'll send a link to you. But if you notice what Jacob's sitting on, looks awfully similar to the casting couch. Let's go back to Thursday. The Cowboys beat the Bulldogs 15 points to 8. We did not have a best bet on this game. And it's another one of those weeks. I know that we went 10-7 on best bets, but we had a lot of games where we had leans, either one way or the other, and we didn't quite pull the trigger, just couldn't get the numbers we wanted or just stayed off. We try and take the bets that we're only most confident in, but I think we can both say that we were leaning towards unders in this one, and it was an absolute grind fest. I mean, it was 8-all till, very, very late, and the Cowboys out-bulldogged the Bulldogs. Usually when you find games where, involving the Bulldogs, where it just turns into an arm wrestle, generally, and especially over the last couple of months, we've seen the Bulldogs do get up in these games, but I do think that the crowd was a factor here. Last game for the Cowboys at home, last game at 1300 Smiles Stadium before they move, and I really do think that the crowd got them home in the last 20 minutes because the Bulldogs looked the better team coming down the stretch in the second half, and I think that the crowd lifted the Cowboys and gave them a little bit of extra oomph in those final 20 minutes, and, I will say that just from a betting perspective, we like to look back on what happened, obviously, throughout the round, but we also like to look forward in what we can bet in following rounds. And I do think that, from a Cowboys perspective, it might be a little bit of a letdown. You played your last game at 1300 Smiles, you got up for it, you got the win, And, I would look... I haven't even looked at the schedule, to be honest, but I would be more inclined to
Storm.
Fade the... okay, there we go.
So good luck. Never mind. You want to play -20 or whatever.
Never mind anyway. But, I wouldn't expect a letdown for the Bulldogs, on the other hand, because they have just been putting in, even though they haven't had a chance for the 8 for 2.5 months now.
It is annoying, but we previewed the game and you said, I don't see how either of these teams are going to get to 20 points. Neither of them got to 10 points. It is 8-all with 3 minutes to go. Then Morgan gets a field goal, 9-8. And then the Cowboys kind of scored a bogus try right on the siren. I think the video ref gave it because it didn't affect the result. And it's,
it wasn't a try.
Closing down for the stadium, a little bit of a party. So what the hell, give it. So 15-8 doesn't even show how much of a grind that match was. As you say, the Cowboys, they don't win any other way but a grind. And it was interesting too, we were tempted by taking the +2.5 with the Bulldogs because we kind of knew Bulldogs are the better team, more formed team, but we had that feeling the Cowboys not only would be up for it, but get the rub of the green. That's exactly what did happen. And Bulldogs got bet all the way into favourites, or basically into pick 'em.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you would have felt good with +2.5. It would have been a brutal way, I feel, for people who may have had Bulldogs +2.5 or something like that. There's someone in our group, in fact, who had Bulldogs +7.5, so got home, and I think middled the other side with -1.5 on the Cowboys.
Which is the most ridiculous middle of all time.
Yeah, and it's funny how even in a game where the results decided, the betting can still keep it very, very exciting. But we should have been on unders. We just never got any great numbers, and we saw a little bit of money coming for overs. It just scared us off. We should have stuck to our guns.
And imagine, I remember someone posted that they got on Bulldogs +10.5 a few weeks back, and then the line shifted to -5.5. And I know that a lot of people were still like, that's a great line, I'm going to take it. And you would be absolutely spewing if you lost +5.5 because of that. Because as you said, I don't think it was a legitimate try there.
Yeah, so just imagine you have +5.5. They're losing by 1. The Cowboys score a try for knock on. Okay, so now it's a 5-point lead. They let Bolton take the kick. So you're thinking, I'm off the hook here. They might still, lose by 5. And then he slots it better than anyone who's ever played for Cronulla since probably Matt Rogers. So, and we're going to get to the Cronulla game too. Let's move on.
Better than the Sharks, that's for sure. Let's move on to the Rabbitohs beating the Warriors, 31 points to 10. We had 4 best bets on the game. And as is usual, we are completely on the right side of a demolition. And we go 3-1 on best bets. God, being a Warriors fan is just fucking dreadful lately. They have not put in the back half of the season. At the start, the first half of the season, you really thought that they were going to be a top 8 team here. We said to you guys before in the preview pod that there's one of 2 ways this can go. Warriors, last home game, they put in a very good effort and they can get close. Or they put in a terrible effort like they have been recently and the Rabbitohs thump them, which happened. And the Rabbitohs, they're getting healthier. Obviously we said they're getting Sam Burgess. They got Sam Burgess back. They got Alex Johnson back. They're getting more towards that, very, very solid premiership threatening team that we said that they could be when they are fully healthy, and they just haven't been fully healthy all year long. What was the most impressive part of this game for me? It wasn't the Rabbits winning 31 points to 10. It was Adam Reynolds slotting a left-footed field goal from 35 metres out. That's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, continue, Jacob.
Yeah, it's a great weekend for the Rabbitohs. A great couple of weeks to get the upset win in Brisbane. We talked about how that to flip their season back on track. And then you say, Burgess returned Johnston, Ethan Lowe got back in this side, Kyle Turner. And, of course, the news out of Manly, that the brutal loss for them and losing Trbojevic. So now, Bunnies right back in the thick box seat of the top 100%. 4. A contender is, massively going to be depleted. And they're looking really good because they've got a team that can at least make a team like the Roosters or the Storm sweat in the finals. Yep. Never mind that, they've got to play the Roosters this week. So that's now a really intriguing matchup. But, yeah, the only reason we didn't sweep this game, I think it was 10-0 or 14-0 to the Bunnies. They were just getting on top. And the Warriors are attacking. And one of the worst play the balls in the history of rugby league occurred where the Warriors player drops it, then accidentally kicks it forward. Everyone stops. Then he figures he might roll it back. The refs just look at each other and go, oh, well, I can't be bothered blowing my whistle. Everyone stops. The Warriors score. Then the Rabbitohs kick off. The Warriors make a break and score again.
Unreal.
So the Rabbitohs didn't touch the ball exactly until the Warriors had scored 10 points. They should have had the ball at 14-0. They didn't touch it again until 14-10. Our only losing bet is Warriors under 8.5, and they had no points, and it was pouring rain, and the Rabbitohs were dominating. We lost that by 1.5 points. Like, cheers, refs. Like, they saw it. They're looking right down the barrel at the play the ball. Couldn't make a call on it, but that killed us. But yeah, the Rabbitohs, really impressive win, and it was, like we said, one of our favourite plays of the round and never really in doubt.
Indeed, I'm going to try and flow through the comments here. We've been joined by our friend John Carrot Diamond. He's inviting Richie Carr into the comments, whom we always love. Darius Boyd will sign with South 2020. God, wouldn't that be a terrible decision for South? But we've heard news today that Darius Boyd will be staying on for another 2 years. So unfortunate for Brisbane Broncos fans, but he will be there to stay. And we're moving on to the Broncos beating the Eels 17-16. This was actually a cracker of a game. Broncos, I guess you could say they were lucky to escape with the win there. But I mean, the Eels, were down a fair bit, scored the last 2 tries, were coming home with an absolute wet sail, and I did think that the Eels had all the momentum once it got to 16 all, and it was once again the Broncos forward pack that won them the game, and we've said this multiple times that this Broncos forward pack is definitely a top 4 forward pack in the comp, if not top 2, and they just need help from their playmakers, which they don't have and they're not going to get for the rest of the season. But like, David Fifita is a monster. We said this young forward pack is awesome. Like, you've got guys like Payne Haas and David Fifita, and like David Fifita goes and makes like 30 meters off a nothing play to set up the game-winning field goal. And brutal for the Eels, they can't make the top 4 now. But very, very gritty win by the Broncos, and that's 2 weeks in a row that they've really put in. I still believe that neither of these teams can contend for a premiership. But I have said this and I'll say it again, that if the Broncos can get some playmakers, that forward pack could be a force for like the next 5 years, but it's just a matter of finding them. And if Darius Boyd stays, unfortunately, that's not going to happen for another 2 years.
It was a really exciting game, and when you saw it play out, you can understand why we couldn't feel strongly about either side, because we didn't really think either of the sides was a 60% winner. You could make a case for taking the Eels, getting Fergo back, and hey, it was a pretty good kind of warm-up for him to get back into the team. We knew he wasn't going to be 100%. They did miss Brown, but at the same time, the Broncos lost Offengowie during the week. TPJ is still... He wouldn't be able to play unless the Broncos got all the way to the prelim, so probably doesn't happen. I think the Eels were a bit unlucky in that they scored 3 tries to 2.
Yep.
They scored a 4th try off a cutout ball that was called forward, which was very marginal. In fact, I thought it was play on. And Mitchell Moses, again, I think, misses 2 sideline conversions or wide conversions while Izako scrapes a couple penalties through. And it's a brutal loss for the Eels, and especially in a week where like Manly did slip up. You look at how they've lost to the Dogs and the Broncos, they could have made that top 4, and that's going to hurt them. But I think that with Fergo getting that run under his belt, Brown to come back into that team, I wouldn't write off the Eels yet. Bloody exciting win for Brisbane. That's 2 weeks in a row, cracking Friday night game, and that does give them energy. And they're not going to be able to play at Suncorp in the finals. But yeah, that forward pack, and Fafita's just adding zeros to his bloody...
100%.
To his contract
100%.
asking price every week, just making himself more money, and he leads the way. But obviously Payne Haas and other blokes as well.
At this point, would you rather have Andrew or David in your team?
It's not even a question. I think every club wants David Fifita.
And that's happened in 1 year. Crazy. And NRL Statman, if you're out there somewhere, is this the first week ever that there's been 2 teams that have scored more tries than the opposition and actually lost the game? That's 2 out of 8. I'm sure that hasn't happened
good question.
very often.
Probably is.
Next game, the Knights beating the Titans 38-4. We had 2 best bets on the game. We liked the overs. Unfortunately, Cash 1 out of 2, which isn't terrible. I probably talked you into Titans in this one, Jacob. I just thought that there was going to be a shitload of points scored in this one. And to an extent there was, but I think if we took the overs, we probably still wouldn't have won because that over was sitting at 42.5, and it would have been a pretty brutal loss for us. But mate, the Titans have just served up a fucking shit heap in the last few weeks. Let me just read you out what they've lost by in the last...
Honestly, please don't.
In the last 9 weeks, this is what the Titans have lost by. 34 points, 16 points, 24 points, 12 points, 52 points, 24 points, 20 points, 22 points, and 18 points. They have not come within single digits, not even close, in the last 9 weeks. If you are a Titans fan, that is an abomination. They came out a few weeks ago, said we're going to put in for the last 6 games of the season. They have not. They've completely given up on the season. And to be honest, yeah, it's great to have a Gold Coast team, whatever. But if you're going to get rid of a fucking team in the NRL, it should be the Titans. They have put up a putrid effort in the back half of the season. And yeah, it's just not a good look. Not only for the Titans, and if you're a Titans fan, but for the NRL as a whole. It's the closest competition in the comp, and you have teams like the Titans serving up a shit heap week after week for the last 10 weeks of the season. It is terrible. Good win for the Knights. I guess we expected them to turn up last home game, and they did. But what the Titans served up was an abomination.
That, just to double check, that's the Titans team that you wanted to take plus 10.5. So lucky I talked you out of that one.
Very true.
Yeah, and let's give a bit more credit to the Knights. Like, they copped a lot of criticism through the week. They really did need to put up a performance. You know, especially it was horrible, rainy conditions, which didn't help us trying to play a couple of overs plays. So the people that turned out are loyal fans, because that side didn't deserve to have a big crowd come and support them, and they got it. And the Titans scored the first try, and you're thinking, like, what is going on? But the Knights recovered, you know, totally dominated the game. And I want to say, because I don't know if we said this before, Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to the Podfathers out there. We had a Podfather multi. It lost by half a point because it did have over 42.5 in this game. There were 38 points. My bad. Well, I don't think it's your bad. I think this was unlucky. There were 38 points scored in this game with 27 minutes to go. And there was only 4 points, like an unconverted try. Even that late try, had it been converted, it goes over. So, geez, if you had the overs, that's pretty rough. Somehow we have a 27-minute period of the game with no points after 38 to begin, and the Knights running riot. They needed that performance. It takes a bit of the heat off, you know, Pierce and the other boys taking responsibility for how bad they've been. It's too little too late because they can't make the 8 now, but it's something at least.
Indeed. Let's move on to a game that I was very wrong on. It was the Storm beating Manly 36 points to 6. I kind of had to twist your arm in this one, Jacob. I know that initially you were leaning towards the Storm in this one. I just thought that Manly at home catching 2.5 points, and we ended up getting 4 points. I thought was too much and an absolute must-win spot to make the top 4. And now, after this loss, Manly is on the outside looking in the top 4 and probably will not make it. But this Storm team, Jesus Christ, has put on an absolute clinic in this one. And you know, I know you're probably going to say this to me, Jacob, but you know, I probably have been wrong in the fact that, you know, down the stretch, especially the last 6 weeks or so, maybe not 6 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, I've said, look, Storm are going to finish the top of the table. They don't need all of these games. They should rest some players down the stretch and take it a bit easy because they can afford to lose a couple here. But yeah, once again, just an absolute clinic by this Storm team. And I'll probably say it again. It's like last week of the season. Like you said, they're playing the Cows and they can't be caught at number 1. And it just makes sense that they would rest players in the last game of the season. But at this point, it's like, you know, if they don't rest, they will crush the Cows. And even if they do rest players, this is such a clinical team when they're not full strength that you don't even feel confident catching double digits with the Cows next week. But disappointing for Manly because I think that they do probably deserve to be top 4, but probably won't get there after this one.
Yeah, look, the Storm is a juggernaut. I've said this multiple times. Like, they're going to be the first team in 50 years or 60 years to have all their regular season losses add up to a margin of like under 10 points. At the moment, they've lost 4 games in the whole year by a combined 8 points. And the thing is, we've got to stop questioning it. And I've been trying to say that, like, stop, you know, yeah, there'll be 1 or 2 flat spots, but Bellamy demands perfection. He's got a lot of players playing for spots. You know, he dropped Curtis Scott earlier in the year. He's not set on who his fullback, his 7 are going to be. And bench spots is competitive. And he, especially off a couple of mediocre performances, because they weren't happy with the way they played against the Titans. And the week before that, they lost a game that led by 18. And they had the revenge factor against Manly. So, look, it's a hard one. We took Manly plus 4.
And to be fair, it wasn't just a play against the Storm. It was a play on Manly as well.
Exactly.
And the fact that they were desperate at home.
And
you know.
Tom Trbojevic tears his pec trying to stop the very first try. So once they're down 6-0 and they lost Tom Trbojevic, it was going to be hard. We'll cop that one for taking Manly because the Storm were too good. Now, we're also on a few unders plays in that game. Unlucky. And that is pretty tough. Like, Manly didn't really fold. Like, one of the tries, the Storm scored 2 tries off deflected grubbers.
Yep.
Storm scored a try where the dead set had like 9 repeat sets in a row and finally got in. And Storm scored a knock on with 90 seconds left that went to the video, somehow didn't get overruled. And that was the only try that actually pushed it above 38.5 points, which we had. So that was a bit rough because we thought it should be a grind. And late trying
to push it over and stuff, you know.
Yeah, like the Storm, who were up, I think, 18-0 in the first half, turned it over on their own goal line and conceded a try to Manly, who'd had no ball all half. So, like, a few like rough calls for the unders there. Whether to say that was the right side, that's debatable. But the Storm were way too good. It really looks like there's 2 teams that are a class above the rest.
Yes, definitely. And before we get to the final game, I'll flick this one over to you, Jacob. Lewis, who's been in the pod for a while, he said, as shit as Dragons are, $1.70 seems too high against the Titans next week. What would you say to that? Do you think that line will only come down? It's
hard. I don't know what mentality the Dragons will go into that one. The Titans at $2.30 at home. We do also say that they've had their moments. Like, it doesn't jump out at me for sure. That Wednesday is for diving in, but Sunday is for retrospecting. And there's still 2 more games to recap. We've got the Panthers, Roosters, and then we're finishing with the cracker that we saw this afternoon.
Absolutely. We'll start with the Roosters beating the Panthers 22 points to 6. We had 2 best bets on the game. Go 1 and 2, obviously plus 14.5, and they lose by 6. 1 and 1. Sorry. Obviously, we have plus 14.5. They lose by 16, so a little bit unlucky there. But Roosters once again too good, and I know you said this a few weeks ago, Jacob. Just in regards to the Roosters' defense, how they are just so solid, and you're right. You're absolutely right. Like, Panthers threw everything at them and can only still score 6 points, and it's just that's one of the things that. Why we said at the beginning of the season, why we still do think that the Roosters will win the comp, and probably if I asked you now, you probably still would say that even though the Storm are leading the table, if they end up playing in the finals, we probably still would take the Roosters to win the premiership here. Their defense is just unbelievable, and that boots the Panthers out of contention for the top 8. But then, once again, it's one of those ones where it's similar to the Storm, and we've seen this happen time and time again with the Storm, where we say, they don't need the game, and Roosters are locked into the number 2 spot here. They can't be caught by third, and they can't catch the Storm. And you might think, will the Roosters be smart and kind of rest players in the last week of the season? But if we were if I was coaching, I probably would. But they've got a roll on now, and they seem to just be happy to roll that into finals and keep that form going into the finals. So it's one of those ones where you can't exactly just say, oh shit, okay, we're going to go against the Roosters last week of the season because they don't need the game. It's not that easy anymore, unfortunately. But it would have been good to see the Panthers in the finals, but just not to be. Just been too inconsistent all season long.
They don't deserve it. Games like where the Cowboys game a couple of weeks ago, games that were very winnable for them, they couldn't get it. I felt they were a little bit hard done by. Now you're talking about Roosters resting players. Well, the thing is, this season's been a masterpiece in the sense that Cooper Cronk sat out on the weekend. Latrell Mitchell, they sat him out the week before. Boyd Cordners, there's no rush at all to bring him back in this team. Jake Friend, if he gets back, these guys that are coming off injury, but they're still in a way fresh. So this team has selectively sat guys out. Even Teddy sat a few weeks ago, and he's in the greatest shape of his life. But he gets a rest when he needs it. Maybe he rests this week. But regardless, whoever they're slotting in is doing a job. Now, you talk about how hard it is to score against them. They're such a cohesive unit in defence. But I do have to say, we took plus 6.5 first half of the Panthers. It was 12-6 at halftime. The Panthers scored a try to make it 12-all.
Yes.
It was the fucking most bullshit obstruction call you'll ever see. Ted Ivano, RCG's walking back. He's ran a lead run. He hasn't touched anybody. He's walking back to his line. And Ted Ivano just makes no effort to tackle, can completely step into a tackle. And the commentators are blowing up saying that's obviously not obstruction. I'm watching it. That's clearly not obstruction. I just don't know what goes through the head of the bunker. Now, that is pretty fucked. Now, look, Roosters deserve to win it. Roosters would have won anyway. But if the Panthers can get to 12-all there, it can be a different game, especially when they didn't cover by 1.5 points. Thing was, second half when it was 18-6, the Panthers just kind of knew they couldn't win. That's the thing. The Roosters do crush your power of will and take your confidence away because they give you so few opportunities. In the end, a late Roosters try crushes our plus 14.5, which we only took off the back of the Cronk news. So again, we lose a play where we got a good number and a good situation, but but that is the risk you take when you go against teams like the Roosters.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last game that we'll go through was an absolute cracker. It was the Raiders beating the Sharks 15 points to 14. We spoke about this in the preview pod. We were on different sides in this one. And the funny thing is, Jacob, whatever side we took, if you were able to talk me into Raiders and if I was able to talk you into Sharks, we would have won either way because we would have been able to get Raiders to win. We would have been able to get Sharks plus 1.5, and both of those bets would have won. But what an absolute cracker of a game. The game starts and, you see the pre-warm-up, and I absolutely loved Sharks in this spot. I thought that, these were fairly even teams. I still do think the Raiders are slightly better. They did show that today, but, Sean Johnson gets ruled out just before the game starts, and you're thinking, oh, shit, this is going to be trouble for the Sharkies, but they turned up. They absolutely turned up. They scored the first 3 tries, and look, I'll say this once, I'll say it again, you have to have a decent, at least average or above average goal kicker in order to win the comp. And it showed today. They scored 3 tries to 2 and they lost the game. 0 out of 3 conversions. 2 of those were definitely makeable conversions. Only one of those was from the sideline. They miss all 3. And the Raiders have just shown all year long that they are resilient as fuck. You lose. I mean, it didn't hurt. It didn't help certainly that the Sharks lost Dugan at halftime. But wow, what a finish to that game. You got 12 all, and it's 13 minutes to go, and the Raiders score a field goal, and the commentators are blowing up. Why would you kick a field goal that early? But I completely agree with it. It's like, in an absolute arm wrestle game, you'll take the 1 point when you can take it. And there were 4 more field goals after that. I'm trying to think back and remember if I can ever think of a game where there was actually 5 field goals in the game, and I don't think I can. But absolutely cracker of a game, and I think that shores up the Raiders' top 4 spot. And the Sharks are going to have a battle on their hands next week against the Tigers to make the 8.
Boy, have the Sharks blown some games this week. And yeah, we did disagree. And again, people can see why I liked the Raiders and why you liked the Sharks. But you were right. The Sharks was the side to be on today. And I actually changed my mind. After Manly lost, that took the pressure off the Raiders, where even if they wanted to play hard in this game, they knew deep down it was not a must-win because they knew as long as they won next week and they're hosting the Warriors, they'll be top 4. So they didn't even need to win it, whereas the Sharkies could have pretty close to locked up a top 8 spot, and it was Gallen's farewell home game. And boy, they came out and showed it. They're monstering them in defence. As you say, they open up the first half with 3 unanswered tries. And to not be able to convert a single one is fucked. Unreal. But you still have to be able to win that game with all that momentum with the crowd, with the amount of work you put the Raiders through. They kept the Raiders
in, and if it's 18-0, it's very... Well, I know the Raiders came back from 18-0 down, but honestly, it's close to being over.
Even if it was 14-0, but they let them back in, and then they traded field goals. It was actually the Raiders who kicked the first field goal. The Sharks kicked the next 2. Literally, if the Sharks could have gathered a kickoff with about 2.5 minutes left, they'd probably win. It was crazy, and it was an epic finish, and the goal kicking did cost them, but you have to take your hat off to the Raiders. Now, as I said, we probably should have been on the Sharks, and we would have probably had a couple winning plays, but you would have felt hard done by that. Johnson, again, who's been one of their better playmakers, let's not forget that Moylan is out of this team, and he does his quad in the warm-up. I mean, they actually still played so well with Flanagan there. But that's a tough one moving forward for them too. And now they're going to play the Tigers. And if they lose that, obviously they're out of the 8. And you've said, this side has the talent to be a contender. They might not even make the finals now.
They are a contender when fully healthy. You're absolutely right. But this team is made of glass. And the chances that, if they're fully healthy and they scraped into the 8 spot, I'd say they're actually a chance of going all the way if they could stay fully healthy throughout the whole final series. But dead set, the team is just so injury prone. We've seen it. Sean Johnson just injured every second week. We know what Dugan is injury-wise. Moylan injury-wise. So it's the chances of them actually staying fully healthy throughout a whole final series is so minimal that I'm willing to rub the Sharks out that they will not contend for a premiership this year. That is going to do it for round 24. Only one more week left of the regular season. Should be an absolute cracker. I mean, it's we often get to round 25, the last week of the season, and it's so hard to tell, what teams are going to try, what teams aren't, because usually the top 4 and the top 8 is pretty much set. But this year, everything's still up for grabs, which is good in a way, because you know that you're going to get full effort out of some teams, but sometimes it's kind of nice to be able to gauge, motivation and that kind of thing when some teams are going to try and some teams won't from a motivational perspective, because sometimes that's when we make our best money. But yeah, should be an absolute cracker of around 25 before we hit finals, Jacob.
Yeah, looking forward to it, because you also can't take footy for granted anymore. Next weekend is the last weekend where we get 8 games of footy, and then it, although it becomes way higher stakes, then we're down to 4, 2, 2. And we love watching the footy, we love betting on the footy, and every game of footy is an opportunity to make money. So these opportunities are going to start to narrow out. So we need to put in a big week ourselves, our preparation, and finish the regular season with a bang.
100%. And before we let you guys go for the night, we'll be back obviously at 6 p.m. Wednesday to break down the last round of the NRL season. But we also handicap NFL, and we're not going to do it on this page because obviously this is a rugby league page, but on our tripod page on Facebook, we will be doing a few pods in regards to the NFL, which starts up on Friday Australian time this week or next week. So make sure you've liked our tripod page on Facebook. Make sure you're in the tripod app and also in our group. There's a link in the description to this video, and we will let you know when we're going to do some NFL pods as well. We're going to do a few preseason pods where we talk about, we've got a mate of ours that's absolutely balls deep into the NFL every single year, and he might do a NFL prop pod with us. He always finds some value. He's made money every year betting the NFL, so that should be a bit of fun as well. So make sure you're in the app, make sure you're in the group. It's all free what we do, and we will catch you guys at 6 p.m. on Wednesday to break down round 25. We'll see you then.